Hello, my name is Matthew, and I had a friend come over earlier this week, and we had a terrific conversation. We were talking about books. We're both readers, and we talked about how we find enjoyment in what we read. It gave me a lot to think about, and I thought I would share with you um, just some of my ideas and things that I think have helped me um, through the years become a better reader, and also um, been learned how to read more widely and for enjoyment. Difficult books, books that I feel like are going to be intimidating, or books that are totally outside of my comfort zone or know nothing about. Um, Things that I've done that help me, I believe, be a better reader. And the first thing is finding, for me, the first thing is finding humor in the things that I read. And this came up with my friend that I was talking with. Um, I was telling him about a certain scene in Paradise Lost, and we were just howling with laughter. And my friend pointed out that I do have a tendency to look for the humor, even if it's not obvious or intentional by the author. Um, I was telling him about Satan being um, cast out of heaven, being stuck in hell, a totally empty hell. There's no souls there yet, and he's just there. Um, Satan's just there with his other devilish creatures. And there's a moment where Satan and his minions all kind of look around and go, "Well, this sucks." Uh, and we were laughing about it, and that's kind of the direct corollary with one of my favorite things to do, which is read, and one of my other favorite things to do, which is talk about books. And I like having bookish discussions that involve laughter, which is not to say that we don't have, or I don't have, serious conversations or very thoughtful conversations, but there's nothing more dreadfully boring than to bring up a book and say, well, this is going to be very serious. This is a very important book. Um, People's faces just wash over. You don't want to hear it. And for me, I think it was almost a reflex in how I approached books, um, in order to facilitate conversation, to look for things that I thought were funny and then talk about them with my friends. In some ways, I try to do that on my channel as well. Another thing, which is probably more important, more of a milestone or a hurdle that I've either gotten over or will be working on that hurdle my entire life, which is that coming to the conclusion that books are supposed to be entertaining. They're meant to be enjoyed. And that might sound very obvious if we were to be talking about contemporary fiction. Clearly, they're written for an audience to be enjoyed, but it took me some mental effort to connect the dots with older works, or works that I thought were going to be difficult or looked intimidating. Um, Shakespeare's audience loved the plays, and Shakespeare wanted to entertain them. And that can be hard to communicate when you just have the book. It's not on stage. You're not in the audience. There's a huge separation in language. Comedy doesn't age very well, so puns can fall flat. You might not know all the historical context and the historical plays or whatever. And if you approach it thinking, well, he wants to entertain me, I want to be entertained, I find myself in much better footing. Um, that doesn't even just apply for fiction. It also applies for history, old histories and biographies, philosophy. I do feel in the best philosophy, I would say Plato, which might be the only example, but in the Platonic dialogues, almost all of them, I think for the exception of one, Plato adds a dramatic element. Socrates is going for a walk. Socrates is going to a drinking party, or he's late for a lecture, or whatever. And then the philosophical part comes into that, but I feel like Plato makes this little drama just for the consideration of the reader, to make it pleasurable and readable. And it's something that I approach everything that I read with that assumption that the writer wants to entertain me. That's certainly, I feel it's certainly true for the best books. And nothing sours me more if I feel like an author is either talking down to me in that voice, or worst of all, if an author wants to bore me or wants to make me suffer. When I start feeling that, I have a more negative reaction than any other aspect of reading. I'm having a relationship with the book, and if he's trying to bore me, he was trying to bore the people that were reading it at the time. I don't need to have anything to do with that. And the third thing, which admittedly was the last revelation that I've had, and might be the most obvious, is that any book, new, but I'm kind of talking about older books that might be kind of scary, or were intimidating to me at some points, is that books were written by people. A real the Decameron was written by a person, and so on. Again, very obvious, but if you're in a classroom setting or it's an assignment and someone just puts this little block of a book on your desk, it can feel like a static artifact. And it took me a lot of time to realize that is wholly not true. These are human creations. And the person that wrote it, no matter how long ago or how different the circumstances are, we're both starting with a lot of things in common. Whoever it is, we both wake up, we both go to sleep, work, eat, and the writer put a tremendous amount of effort and work into making something. And really early on, in Western history, or world history, it became apparent that books survive. And writers know that because they were at any point they were reading books that were even older. And what that means to me is that although indirectly there was a person in the past, like right now I'm holding The Lives of the Poets by Samuel Johnson. Indirectly, Samuel Johnson, the person, wrote this for me to read. And acknowledging that relationship adds so much to how I approach what I'm reading. Um, very, hardly at all anymore do I have a real feeling of intimidation, um, because um, because it's written by a person, I guess, or I should say, for all the things that I just mentioned, have helped me realize that um, old, challenging, weird, obscure books um, were written by people that want to entertain me. And one of my favorite things is to talk about the books that I read with my friends in an entertaining way. Uh, so, none of this is, if it's not clear, none of this is advice. These are um, thoughts that I've had with how I've either learned or grown into really being able to approach any book with the expectation that not only is it going to be pleasurable for me, but that the author, a real person on the other side, meant it to be entertaining to me. The best books are not trying to bore me. And I look for the humor in things because I don't want to bore you. Um, so that's well. I'll end there. Leave a comment if you would like. I would love to know um, how you find pleasure in the things that you read. I'd be interested to know if you think I'm totally off base or saying things that are um, totally obvious. Even if they are obvious, they could be taken for granted. Anyway, leave a comment if you'd like, and thank you for watching.